Today we're debating, is faith harmful? And we're starting right now. Hey. All right. So, like I said, we're debating, is faith harmful? We have our resident Buddhist on the one side, Brenton, and we have an atheist on the other side, Armin right here. They're ready to go at it. Even though it looked like Armin would be the affirmative and he would usually go first, we're going to let Brenton go first just to set everything up. But before we start, I just want you guys to know, if y'all want to listen to more of this stuff, their links should be in the description below if you want to check them out on their content. And also, before we start, I just want to welcome everybody to Modern Day Debates. This is a space to go where reason is all that matters. Whatever your walk of life, it doesn't matter. Gay, straight, atheist, it doesn't matter. You know, what matters here is just the ideas. All right. So let's get started. Brenton, you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brenton Lengel. I am a playwright, Ringo-nominated comic creator of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. Second issue was just sent to the printer. And I am a Nichiren Buddhist. So that's going to be informing a lot of what I talk about. So to begin, once the Buddha was wandering when he reached a town, and the villagers approached him saying, "Shakyamuni, there are some mystics and priests who have visited us, and they explain and elucidate their own doctrines, but disparage, denigrate, deride, and denounce the doctrines of others. But then some new ones come, and they too speak of their own doctrines and disparage the doctrines of others. We are perplexed and in doubt as to which speak the truth and which speaks falsehood." And the Buddha replied, "It is fitting for you to be in doubt, for this is a perplexing problem. Whenever you assess a teaching, do not believe, do not go upon what you have been repeatedly told, nor upon tradition, nor upon rumor, nor upon what is in a scripture, nor upon what we can surmise, nor upon axiom, nor upon specious reasoning, nor upon a bias towards a notion that has been pondered over, nor upon another's seeming ability, nor upon the consideration, these are the words of our teacher. Good people, when you yourselves know these things are good, these things are not blamable, these things are praised by the wise and undertaken and observed, these things lead to benefit and happiness, only then enter and abide in those teachings." Selectively quoted from the Kesapucha Sutra. If there's anything that exemplifies both the triumph and the sickness at the heart of the modern world, it is the continual erosion and lack of faith that in the zeitgeist. And by this, I simply don't mean religious faith, though since the Enlightenment, and especially in the last few decades in the United States, in particular, we have seen a definite wane in both the power of the church over public life and in Christian belief in particular. So much so that it seems to me quite strange that someone could even truly believe in the miraculous events described in the Bible in the sense that they are literally true. Science's ability to perform real miracles has certainly undermined the credibility of those who claim historical, or from my view, mythological miracles as those that relate to God, the Father, and all the angels. This is not to say that there are not those who profess to possess great reserves of faith and an unspeakable, unshakable belief in the literal truth of the Bible or the Quran, or most frustrating of all recently, the literal historical truth of the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. You can find such people quite easily. And if you doubt their commitment to these miraculous happenings, don't worry, they'll very soon tell you otherwise in no uncertain terms. But that's really not the kind of faith I'm interested in defending tonight. Because in truth, it's not really faith, it's belief. And belief is much easier to find even in the modern world. People believe in the Constitution, or in capitalism, or socialism, or most frustrating of all, they believe in QAnon. They believe in the shrewdness, intelligence, righteousness of their leaders, often despite all evidence to the contrary. They believe in their nationality and their race, and even their so-called skepticism and rationality, and the fact that 9/11 was an inside job, and that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. All of these things they believe, And all too often, these are simply excuses to abandon compassion and grant oneself an unearned feeling of power over those they perceive of being too weak and thus somehow beneath them. Though it seems paradoxical, I would like to put forth the proposition that as faith recedes from the world, unjustified belief does not vanish with it. In fact, it seems to me that this sort of belief is, if anything, enjoying something of a resurgence, which is incredibly disappointing given the recent history of the 20th century and the disasters of the various religious wars, World War I, World War II, and the Holocaust. Now, those who know me might ask themselves, why is it that a self-professed anarchist is here tonight defending faith? Why someone who frequently speaks positively about the prospects of socialism and even libertarian communism might have any good words to say about a concept that is regularly defined by the layman as some version of the act of accepting a proposition to be true without convincing evidence. And you might rightly point out that there are some of the more colorful statements to come out of the classical anarchist tradition. These are slogans like "No gods, no masters," and "The only church which illuminates is a burning church." But what they might not be as familiar with is perhaps the single most famous and influential anarchist in the world, which would be the literary genius Leo Tolstoy, who, invoking St. Luke, famously put forth the proposition that the kingdom of God is within you. And this is a proposition that, despite my current incredulity towards the popular conceptions of the Christian God, along with Jesus and all the angels, I find nonetheless to be incredibly compelling and, in fact, most likely to be correct. Of religion, Karl Marx famously said, "Man makes religion. Religion does not make man." Man is no abstract being squatting outside of the world. Man is the world of man, the state, society. This state and this society produce religion. It is the fantastic realization of the human essence, since the human essence has not acquired any true reality, which, despite being a practicing Buddhist myself, I find to be quite correct, along with, as it seems, the famous existential philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, who wrote, "Existence precedes essence. Man first of all exists, encounters himself, and defines himself afterwards. To begin with, man is nothing. He will not be anything until later, and then he will be what he makes of himself. Thus, there is no true human nature because there is no God to have a conception of it. Man simply is. Not that he is simply what he conceives himself to be, but he is what he wills, as he conceives himself after already existing. Man is nothing else but that which he makes of himself." And it might seem curious to you, but I agree with Sartre as well. The reason I defend faith is that the kind of insane, fervent belief that my interlocutor has such an issue with is not really faith. It is, in fact, a conspicuous overreaction caused by a distinct lack of faith in the adherent. Because what is faith? Is it to doggedly insist that everything written in your scriptures must literally be true? And if you don't like it, just you watch yourself, because the day of judgment is coming. And if you reject the truth, oh, then you're going to get it. And in fact, I have so much faith, I won't even wait for the day of judgment to come. I'll smite you myself right here in the Lord's name, and then you'll know. Then you'll know that I'm right. I will hurt you so deeply that you'll have to admit that Jesus is the Messiah, or that there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet, or that Kali is your mother. Obviously not. The person who does that has no faith. That's why they're so rattled by doubts when even the slightest whiff of blasphemy brushes by their nose. Whenever someone disrespects the American flag or the Constitution or marries outside their race, the point is these people are bewitched. They are hypnotized by appearances, by stories and symbols, and this they confuse with actual reality. They confuse a drawing with their mother, a scrap of cloth with their closest and most deeply held community, and a vapid charlatan with their most honored, heroic champion. The way humans express actual faith, true faith, which is, in my opinion, necessary for our continued spiritual and material success, as well as psychological health, is by doing it. Faith is a muscle. It is one that you build through religious practice, and it is something that you put into practice in your real life. If you do not do that, you do not have faith. And how do you put it into practice? By making a leap of faith, not in regard to a doctrine or a tradition or an act of superficial reverence to what you might confuse with ultimate reality. The way you have real faith is to make that leap, to place your trust in the universe, in actual reality, to give up power and control and to surrender to it and trust it as you would another. As you would another. And you say to the world, despite how many imminent disasters seem to wait just upon your doorstep, let's see what you're going to do. Or to put it another way, therefore I say unto you, be not anxious for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body what ye shall put on. Is it not the life more than the food, and the body more than the raiment? Behold the birds of heaven, they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God doth so clothe the grass of the field, which today and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not more clothe you? O ye of little faith, be not anxious, but seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and these things shall be added unto you. Be not therefore anxious for tomorrow. And the beautiful thing is that when you say this to the world, when you make this act of faith, when you give up power and stop trying to control everything and make everything go your way, you're also saying that to yourself. Let's see what you're going to do. And therefore, paradoxically, the more you give up power, the more powerful you become. This is because evolution does not favor organisms that experience reality exactly as it is. In fact, evolution favors organisms that experience reality in a way that is most conducive to our survival and or reproduction. The sensory reality that we all see, that we experience through touch, taste, smell, and vision, this is to actual reality what your computer interface is to a computer. And of course, being that we are creatures which can die quite easily, open a vein here, an artery there, and that's all he wrote. We often overestimate the dangers that we face and underestimate ourselves. And yet, within our head, within the system that evolution has built for us to interact with ourselves and the world around us, everything seems to be ever mounting tragedies. Yet, what I have personally learned by making this act of faith more than once and by pushing myself beyond my limit, when I knew that there was no more that I could do, and yet I did more, when I was sure I would die, and yet I continued. By doing this, I became far more successful than I ever would have dreamed. And this is why people say that faith can move mountains, because when you stop defending yourself constantly, when you stop looking and waiting for the disaster that is you're certain is waiting just around the corner, that frees up your energy. Ultimately, what faith is, what the evolutionary purpose that I believe it serves in humanity, is the ability to enact a manual override towards our perceptions, because of course our perceptions are imperfect, and there are times that we must reach beyond them. We must exceed our own imposed limits, and of course then a mustard seed of faith can move mountains. And that is why we find ourselves within this society now, with all of its toil and frustration, devastation, depression, and fear. It is a lack of faith that is eating the West alive. And the only way that we can correct our course is to open ourselves up to the world and relearn this teaching that our ancestors knew when they faced down the world, whether there was a leopard waiting for them in the field or a blade of grass. Thank you.
All right. We appreciate that opening. Now, Armin, a lot of stuff that you got to agree with. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to let you solve, but I'm saying, like, when listening to Brenton, it sounds like a lot of your worldview is very similar in some cases. I want to see how you extract out your differences. So go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No. Go ahead. By the way, I just want to let you guys know you guys could interrupt me at any time. In fact, I'm completely open to that. Okay, so it's not rude if you want to interrupt me. That's completely okay. Okay. I just did hear a lot of. By the way, Brent, you're really good at narrating. Like you make things sound a lot very powerful. So good job on that. But I didn't hear any. I don't know if maybe I missed it, but I heard a lot of descriptions for faith. But did you give like a definition? Because I really want to know exactly what we're talking about. Like I heard like it could do this, it could do this. These are its qualities. But then, did you maybe like do you have an actual definition of what we're talking about here?
I think faith is the ability to place your trust in others and the world as you would another person, as you would like your most trusted friend.
Okay, but here's the key. Here's the important thing. Trust based on what? Like, I think obviously having trust in some things and not having trust in other things. Obviously, we all agree that it's okay to it's a good thing for us to be able to trust things, right? That is not the issue. It's what that criteria for that trust is that is the difference between.
I would say, it is ultimately it's the ability to override the senses. And necessarily like your own brain and your ego's protective instincts. So the trust shouldn't probably, I would say, it might not be best for it to be based on absolutely nothing, but at the same time, by nature of the ability, it must be able to be based on nothing, if that makes sense. So the ability to place trust within the world, despite what we seem to perceive, despite the danger that we seem to perceive in doing that.
Okay, so I believe in making calculated risk. Okay, but again, calculated based on what? Like and also when you're saying overriding our senses, right? Overriding our, what was the other thing you said? Instincts, right? I also agree that our senses and our instincts and our intuitions are extremely flawed. So I think that we need better systems to go beyond that and learn about things and trust in things not based on that. But so I agree that we have to go beyond that. But again, I think when you say we have to go beyond that, you didn't give us how, like based on what methodology. You're saying based on nothing.
I actually gave that at the beginning. And it was presented. It was presented as a dialectic. So I thought you might have focused more on the negatives, but in the sutra that I quoted, the Buddha says specifically about how to assess whether a teaching is true or not. It says, do not believe, do not go upon what you've been repeatedly told, nor upon tradition, nor upon rumor, nor upon scripture, nor upon what we can surmise, nor upon axiom, nor upon specious reasoning, nor upon a bias towards a notion that has been pondered over, getting attached to an idea, nor upon another's seeming ability, nor upon the consideration, these are the words of our teacher.
Right.
Yeah. So he says, then he gives the positive because it's a dialectic. So he gives the negative and then the positive. Good people, when you yourselves know these things are good, these things are not blamable, these things are praised by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things, and this is the most important thing, these things lead to benefit and happiness, only then enter on and abide in them. So,
but there's no criteria there. It's just saying if you know.
No, there is criteria.
What is the criteria?
The criteria there is, like the Dalai Lama will famously say, the true test of any religion is the effect that it has on its followers. Lives.
It evidence-based.
Yeah, in a way, yes, evidence-based. You can look at faith. I would say it's faith, but I would say it's faith that is informed by what we are able to observe. So
wait, for instance, so faith is so you're saying your definition. So we're getting finally to some criteria. Okay, so the things that we shouldn't rely on, I agree with you. Not on intuition, not just based on perceptions, not based on instinct, and not based on old scripture, not based on things that people, unwarranted authority. Yes, all of that I agree, right? But when we leave all that, I want to understand now where we go to know the things that we know and the things that we trust and which the criteria. Okay, so is now if we're saying the positive is that based on evidence, you're saying, right? So is your definition of faith is to evaluate things based on evidence? Is that your definition of faith?
I wouldn't say entirely, but the evaluation of things based on evidence should come into the equation, essentially.
What else other than
evidence? Well, once again, so what we have, the evidence they're essentially going is, so these things are good, these things are not blamable. So that is the person's own internal moral intuition, what he's applying to there. But also then he goes, these things are praised by the wise. So expert opinion.
Wait, I thought we're not going to use intuition.
He didn't say intuition here. He's saying all of these together, by the way. No, I didn't say intuition. I said, hang on, tradition.
Okay. So wait, so tradition is part of the negative or the positive?
The negative.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So let's forget the negative, because I think we agree on all the things that we shouldn't rely on. I think we agree on that. Okay.
Which is what I was trying to explain the positive to you here.
Sorry.
So you said because these things are good. So what he says, good people, when you yourselves know these things are good, these things are not blamable. So that's the first part of the equation here.
But there's no criteria. It just says how do we know?
I'm trying to explain what he's saying when he's saying.
All right, sorry.
What he's expressing with those words is not literally these things are good, but what he's saying is that the person knows their moral intuition holds that the teachings they're not detecting any problem with the teachings with their moral intuition. So, for instance, when someone says, "Oh, so in this teaching it would be a great one, Destiny, for instance, most recently tried to build his moral system. And he said, in my moral system, it is permissible to kill someone to protect your property, even if that property is just a stick of gum, assuming the fight escalates. That instantly trips moral intuition. So that is a thing that is blamable. To murder someone over a piece of gum is always blamable.
So you're using moral intuition then?
Yeah, to begin with, but it's not just the moral intuition. So these things are praised by the wise, undertaken and observed, and these things lead to benefit and happiness. So then you have expert opinion comes into it, but also not only is the expert opinion taken in there, but also it is practiced, and we have seen a actual benefit and happiness come out of it. So essentially what you have is you've got the individual component, you've got the social component, and then you also have the more utilitarian component. So if you put all three of those together, the result of that conversation lets you know whether or not to accept a teaching.
All right, so there's three things here. The first one was moral intuition. The second one was expert opinion. And the last one sounded like evidence for the benefit of, evidence for the benefit and harm. That was the last one.
Exactly. Okay. What the ideas and what the teaching has actually done within reality when put into practice.
Okay. So the first thing I noticed is that this is not what most people mean when they say faith.
No, and I agreed with that. I don't think it's what most people mean when they say faith. I mean, you would say usually people who are theologians, or if they're dealing within a mystical religious tradition, that's going to be closer to what I defined as faith, as opposed to what most lay people would define as faith, which is
it seems like you have your very own personal definition to me.
Well, everyone has a personal definition of literally everything, because language is symbolic, and no one's individual definition of anything is going to be the same as anyone else's.
All right, quick, guys. All right, so I was just counting that as your opening. You was asking for clarifying questions. But I don't
have any opening. I'm just
I just set that time aside for that. So we'll go directly into the open debate right now.
Yes.
Let's keep in mind the topic, which is faith harmful? Now you heard Brenton's definition of faith, and I know you can also argue faith in general terms. So if you do want to address that, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to faith being harmful, Brent, is it okay if I just say Brent?
Yeah, Brent? You can say Brent. That's what my friends call me, and I consider you a friend.
Yeah, me too. Do you you agree? I think you agree with me that it's better for society to believe in more true things and less false things, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, and we're both utilitarians here.
So my view of morality is, I tend to lean more towards the utilitarian side than the deontological, okay. But in reality, I think all human morality is a conversation between deontological and utilitarian elements. For instance, if you go pure utilitarianism, you can justify, for instance, killing someone and harvesting their organs against their will to save 5 people. Whereas what I would say is, no, you actually can't do that, because when you do that, you create a precedent for abusing people. And therefore, once that precedent is created, it's going to impact.
So you have a utilitarian argument for why we shouldn't do that then?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I have a humanistic argument. The way, in my opinion, like the way humans tend to actually make moral judgments in reality is a combination of instinct, which is really their compassion, alongside deontological rules that seem to work, alongside a calculus that what's the likely outcome. And in fact, that's really interesting because you notice it somewhat parallels the Buddha's definition of how you evaluate what is a correct teaching.
Okay, so we're basically enough, we're close enough to want more people to be happy and less people to be miserable. That's basically it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, given that it's better for the world and almost everybody for more people to believe in true things, I think what we care about is to make sure that we are promoting methodologies that are coming at for people to come up with their belief systems, methodologies that work, methodologies that give you more true beliefs and less false beliefs, right?
Yes, I would say that, though I wouldn't necessarily say that Western skepticism is a good way to go about doing that for a number of reasons.
Okay, let me write that down.
Like,
I don't
basically,
know what you mean by that, but okay.
I mean, the Enlightenment tradition, the broad set of ideals that are advanced by, for instance, the Four Horsemen, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, that kind of thing.
I do have I do get triggered when people call this Western, because I do think these Enlightenment traditions belong to the whole world.
We got an amazing. I would agree that they do belong to the whole world, and the West isn't really even a real thing. It's something that was made up for political convenience. But I use it because people understand what I mean when I say it. But I'll say, so the Enlightenment traditions of rationality that we saw coming out of like David Hume and stuff, and that eventually then were most recently re-expressed in our lifetime by Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, Sam Harris, and who was the fourth guy?
Daniel Dennett.
Daniel Dennett, yeah. Which
but way before that, like Carl Sagan.
I tend to be a fan of Carl Sagan, actually. Yeah. He and Alan Watts actually had a lot of overlap in what they talked about, and I think Alan Watts is probably one of the smartest philosophers in human history. So
Bertrand Russell. With the Russell,
Bertrand Russell, yeah.
Bertrand Russell, yeah. Those guys were like, this is nothing new. Like, I know because the Four Horsemen were in our lifetime, but these ideas always had their champions.
Certainly, yeah.
They had the champions again, not just in the West. They have the champions for hundreds of years, or thousands of years in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Far East, in North and South America. Like, again, this is not. These ideas are not. They have the champions all around the world.
You are totally right. And in fact, there was a fact, I can't remember the guy's name at the moment, but there was an African philosopher who basically came up with like all the ideas of the Enlightenment that would be later like expressed by John Locke, like 100 years before John Locke. And I had that fact memorized for a while because I knew I was going to be arguing with some neo-Nazis, and I was like, they're going to say nothing good ever came out of Africa, when Africa actually beat us to that.
I'm discovering more Indian philosophers who were arguing these things, thousands of years ago, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And the Buddhists were in a lot of ways arguing these things. I mean, you heard.
Well, by the way, I said, just to be clear, I said Indians, not Hindus, okay? Because a lot of Hindus try to claim these people for their own religion, but they were completely materialistic and didn't believe in any of that. But again, so go on. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I know you've had some issues with Hindus lately. You're being sued for what, $100 million now?
Like, yeah. But okay, so here's the thing: the three things that you mentioned as your definition of faith, right? Moral intuition, expert opinion, evidence for the benefit and for the harm. The first part is it seems to me contradicts one of the things that you said earlier, because you think like we should override over our perceptions, and now you're saying we should rely on faith. And the first element of your criteria was moral intuition. Yeah. So what happened to overriding our perception?
Yeah, it's a good point. The criteria there is more for judging a like whether or not a teaching is true or false, but it is, it is consistent with Buddhist faith as it is practiced.
Oh, so Buddhism is your criteria?
Not really Buddhism.
What happened to not relying on old scripture?
Oh, well, the Buddhists don't rely on the sutras. The sutras are there. You can find
old
great
teachings
wisdom in them. Yeah, but the sutras are not literally true. And you'll be very hard pressed to find a modern Buddhist who will say that the sutras are literally true.
Okay, wait. So we're changing the elements here. So your moral intuition was not moral intuition. It's basically checking with Buddhism to see if it agrees with Buddhism.
No, certainly not.
Okay, what is it then? Sorry.
So, and that's kind of the important thing, like about Buddhism. Like, really, what I appealed to when I said moral intuition, you'll notice I used the word compassion. And I think that compassion is the basis of all morality. I don't think you can build a moral system without compassion. If you try to,
compassion fuels our desire to have a moral system, but again, but the standards that but compassion is not very good at figuring out the best. Like, our sense of compassion is very, very flawed. It's not at all correlated to the level of harm. For example, we all know that we feel more compassion for one child starving right next to us than 100,000 children starving far away from us.
That's not a problem with compassion. That's Dunbar's number. That's the human brain.
No, but there's many examples like this. Like, there's many examples like this that shows like compassion. We need compassion, or else if we didn't have compassion, we wouldn't even be motivated to have a moral system. But when we eventually come up to creating
you can be motivated to have a moral system without compassion. I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah. But again, I'm just saying we can, but I'm just saying the motivation comes from the fact that we have compassion. Okay. Sure. It fuels it, right? But I'm saying when it comes to creating that standard that makes the most amount of people happy and the lowest number of people miserable, we can't rely on our sense of compassion, because our sense of compassion is very flawed when it comes to trying to avoid the most amount of harm. Right?
I wouldn't trying to avoid the most amount of harm. Essentially what you're saying is, if I'm correct here, so we have a thing called Dunbar's number. It's been colloquially referred to as the monkey sphere.
One example of many flaws.
Yeah. But let me explain. So essentially what you're saying is that since humans can only recognize 150 or so individuals as actual people, and everyone else gets grouped into an abstract, even though they are just as much people as the 150 people.
I don't want to really go down to this detail because we're getting a little bit off track. We just agree that there's flaws, right, in our sense of our intuition.
I mean, there's flaws, and nothing within this reality is perfect. So obviously, there's flaws in everything, incling our sense.
Right. So we have to look at the methodology that has the least amount of flaws, right? This is okay. So when we
work to establish a methodology that has the least amount of flaws.
Right. I'm saying the methodology that I suggest is superior to the methodology that you suggest when it comes to figuring out what's true, right? So like using critical thinking methods, and also the scientific method has its flaws, right? Mm-hmm. Just like you said, every method has flaws, but it has proven to be giving us the best answers, the most reliable answers, the most consistent answers, the models for predicting the future in a way that it doesn't contradict other models, but more than any other system, right? So I think it's dangerous to the world for anybody to try to promote methods that are inferior to these methods.
All right. So I understand that argument, but I think it's fundamentally flawed. Okay. And this is because science can tell us how, but it can't tell us why. It can't provide meaning. It can only give us, it can only describe the world, essentially, and make predictions. And yes, usually these are correct predictions about the world.
Science tells us why all the time. But depends on what you mean by why. Yeah. Can you, because, yeah.
Well, like why something should be valuable. Like, why Camus famously said that the most important question in philosophy is like why we shouldn't just kill ourselves. Like,
okay, but that's a useless question, because there are things.
No, it's not a useless question. Like, no, the game of life, the candle.
Okay, let me explain to you, right? I mean, when it comes to trying to, here's the thing. For example, let's say I want to eat, okay? Yeah. And me and you get together and we try to figure out, okay, we have a land here, we have some seeds here, and we want to eat. We don't want to starve, okay? And we come up with, use the scientific method to figure out how can we yield the most food out of this land? How do we plant the seeds? How do we water it? Yeah, come up with all, like, we don't use faith. We don't go based on intuition. We don't go look at old scripture. We don't go look at practices of the monks, right? We just like, okay, look, this is evidence-based. Like, look, the people that show that here's how you get the highest amount of results for based on these practices. You're going to get the most amount of food in the shortest amount of time from each square meter of land. Okay, so you use a scientific method to get what you want, right? But then you come in like, hey, your method shows us, your methodology shows us how to get the most amount of food from this land. But it doesn't answer this. Your methodology doesn't answer this question. Why do we want to eat? Why do we even desire not to starve?
Yeah, I'm going to show you the thing that this is why this is actually a good question to ask. Not exactly the way that you just asked it, but here's the problem that is, and I'm going to say in the broadest sense, you've just described the problem that we're currently dealing with, which is global warming. What's happening here is technology, techne from the Greeks. This is a mode of thinking that comes where you begin to see things within your environment, not for what they are, but for their utility. And Hegel talked about this, or not Hegel, Heidegger. The process is called enframing. So when we look at the field, we enframe the field and we think, how can we bring out this field's potential to feed us and to produce as much food as we possibly can? Now, this is not to say this type of thinking doesn't have its place. It's very, very good for getting these types of results. However, it can also lead to some very, very serious disasters that it can't take control of. And a big point of it here is right now in the United States, we produce enough food to feed everyone in the nation many, many times over. We throw away 40% and just leave it to rot.
Okay, but that's not the point I was trying to get at, because what I'm trying to
that's what you were trying to get at, but it is the logical extension of the thinking that you were putting forth without the why. Without why is life good? Why should we sustain our species? Why should we care about other humans? Why should we care about the planet? Why should we not just simply follow our instincts?
No, the question, here's the thing. To me, the question of why do we want the things that we want is an interesting question, but it doesn't help us into getting the things that we want. It's basically me saying, you're saying, Armin, what's your favorite color? Okay, I'm saying, well, my favorite color is green.
It's not always good to get the things that we want. Like,
okay, I think we have a different understanding what wanting means then, okay?
Yeah.
Because if you say it's not good to get the things that we want,
you're just always good to get
the things that we want. Can you give me an example of when is it not good for us to get what we want?
Okay.
Just one short example, please.
Sure. It is not a good idea for an alcoholic to get the alcohol that they want.
Okay, and why?
Because they will kill themselves with it.
Okay, and that's bad for them, right?
Yeah. I would say I would say the pursuit of pleasure.
The utility will go lower.
Not even just the utility. The utility may be fine. Like they may drink more and more, but it deals damage to them and deals damage to the people around them.
Okay, so they would not want that. Basically, they would have a society. They would live in a life that would be miserable. That would be less happy. They would deal they will end up in a situation that is less desirable to them.
They might, well, it may or may not be less desirable to them. A heroin addict could honestly have a more desirable situation being constantly high on heroin or Molly or something than what they would have, but they would still deal damage to their community.
Okay,
and they would hurt the people.
You're dealing with the wants of other people. At the end of the day, what I'm just telling you, what I'm just trying to say is, at the end of the day, it's about what we want. Like anything you might try to dance around this, but this is about what we and other people want. It's always the question is,
certainly
what do we want?
But here's also the thing is, we don't really know what we want. We only have these things that we think we know what we want. When we
great.
We think
so figuring out what we actually want, it's a very good thing to try to figure out, right?
I would argue that I would honestly argue we can't figure that out.
Like we can get closer to that. We could always get closer to that. We have had revelations of like, oh, I thought I wanted this car because I genuinely want a car, but now I realize I want this car because of the perception that it creates among the people who see that I have this car. Like people come to those realizations all the time, and they live better lives when they understand what they actually want.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is the only ultimately, if you follow desire to its logical conclusion, the only thing that you can really say that you want is a pleasant surprise. Like beyond that. Well,
okay, but we're getting a bit off track. I don't understand
beyond, because the topic of
the
thing is
but my understanding is that so you're just describing my point of bringing that example is that whatever the reason, like you say, oh, science can't tell us, science cannot tell.
It doesn't. That's not the why that I was meaning with it.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I understand that. But the thing is that you also say that we can't really answer that question, right? Like, why?
We can, and we can and we can't. There's a number of reasons why, because I think ultimately these are value judgments, and they are generated. Any kind of a judgment is generated within the mind. The issue is that an over-reliance on technological and scientific thinking leads one into a frame of mind where they begin to see themselves and the environment not as being inherently valuable in and of itself, but as serving a purpose. And this
doesn't follow. That doesn't follow. But let me get back to, we'll get to this one, but let's address the other one, right? So given that the why is basically a subjective thing, right? And you really can't have a final answer on that one, right? Then we have to deal with the part.
Well, you can have a final
part.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the part that we have control over is more important for us to figure out the methodology. The part that you said, when I said we can't, you say we can't answer why. Well, if we can't, then there is no methodology that we need to worry about. Like, it's just like, it's the answer.
Well, I'm not seeing how this.
Can I finish? Can I just finish?
Okay, I'm just not seeing how this ties back to faith. I feel like we're
because we're talking about the best methodology, right? The best methodology to get the most things that we want. Okay, and I'm saying you that your methodology of faith is inferior to my methodology, and given that the whole point of life is to make
my methodology is not simply faith. It's more that faith is an integral component.
Right. Okay. So I'm just saying that's a flawed part of your method. If you get rid of that, you will be better off.
Okay, I would disagree.
All right. So Armin argued that the reason why faith is harmful is because the methodology, like the scientific method, produces more, and to then go for some other.
More reliable method for getting to the truth. Is that essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in my car and I'm getting at my destination, and you're telling me like, get out of the car. I have something else that is better than the car that you're driving it. I'm like, show me what it is.
All right. Well, Brenton, let me ask you a question, Brenton, so we can get back on topic.
Sure.
Are you saying that? So your position is faith is good. And what I want to know is your version of faith good, or is the general accepted terminology
Good
Faith
question
good.
by Mark.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the general accepted terminology of faith that you would read in the dictionary that the layman has is usually bad.
Ooh, okay, good.
Now, I will also say, however, that the way that faith is actually realized and practiced by many people without realizing what they're doing can be very, very good. Again, this is why I read that quote from Mark, the lilies of the field. You know, I mean, it's been shown in studies that people who possess like strong, positive religious faith deal better with stress, are less depressed than those who don't. Now, it can go the other way if you have faith in very negative things, like if you think God is going to punish you every minute, that actually hurts you. But they tend to have, like neurologically speaking, a positive expression of faith tends to show a more...
I've seen studies that actually contradict that.
So well, which study? Then, like, how does it?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we could do that later, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, the individuals, like again, like you mentioned, somebody could be happier on heroin. We have to look at the consequences of the society as a whole, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and you know, I would say certain things like, you know, various religious wars, terrorism, those kinds of things. These are people. Again, I wouldn't call that kind of behavior faith. At least not the faith that I am interested in defending. I would actually ascribe it to an over belief. Do you not
agree that when most people, when they use the word faith, they're basically giving you like, it's basically their way of saying that I believe in this and I have no fucking reason why I need to. Oh, by the way, can I swear on this channel? Sorry.
I guess so. I've
sworn on this. Too late. Sorry. Okay. Do you not agree that the vast majority of people, when they use faith, is basically when they are admitting that they have zero good reasons to believe in something, and when you're asked for the, you know, that's just they perceive zero good reasons to believe in anything, but also they just offer faith.
Well,
basically, an excuse.
So our consciousness tends to focus on negatives more than positives. So in that moment, like, they may actually have lots of good reasons to believe a good outcome will come, but they are not perceiving them in that moment because of where their life and their mind is at a certain time. And this again is important. This is again like why faith. I think why humans evolved to have faith, because
that's why it's dangerous
if it weren't useful.
So there's two things: either they believe in things without having zero good reasons to believe in it, or they have good reasons and they fail to communicate it, and
they have good reasons and fail to perceive it,
or they fail. Okay, they perceive it. Okay, so in both of these examples, getting rid of faith would be better, because if you get rid of faith, then people will be looking for reasons for believing it. Let me finish. Yeah. People, if you get rid of faith in this, the first situation, you would actually motivate people to actually have reasons for the things that they believe. In the second situations, if they do have reasons and they don't perceive it, if you get rid of faith, now you're helping people to actually now start perceiving and the reasoning behind the things that they believe in. In both situations, removing faith will improve the belief system that the person has.
Only if someone has perfect consciousness that can accurately perceive reality, which we know they don't and can't. So
no, it's not about perfection. It's about getting closer to reality. No, right, it's not about absolute reality.
Yeah, right. But whether it's about absolute reality or not, we know that human brains are flawed in this way.
Yeah, but it's about having less flaws. It's not about getting rid of flaws entirely.
Right, but you can't. You're essentially prescribing a solution that doesn't actually fix the problem. What I'll compare this to is, okay, so there's one of the ways that we know that that nature does not favor organisms that perceive reality exactly as it is. Instead, it favors organisms that perceive reality in ways that are generally most conducive to that species' survival and reproduction. It happens with regard to a species of beetle in Australia. And the thing is that with this particular species of beetle, their females, like what they consider a sexy female, is essentially a female that is like large, round, bumpy, and brown. Like that's like the particular like character of the female's shell. Right. And this species, which has survived on this planet for millions of years, is now going extinct because humans are throwing away beer bottles. And the male insects are seeing these beer bottles, and to these those are like the sexiest beer bottles they have ever perceived in their entire life. And they know beyond a shadow of a doubt in their mind that that is the sexiest possible female, and it's a real female, and they're going to jump in there and do what they're going to do. And of course, they're not mating and they're dying off because what's happened is that a crack in their perceptions has entered into the picture. When you push in this direction of like 20th century rationalism, when you try to prescribe the scientific method as the answer for all of life's problems and all of the issues within and rationality, what happens is that the person becomes focused on their mind and using their mind to solve the problem.
It's exactly the opposite. I mean, the scientific method seems to be solving the exact problem that you're addressing. To go beyond your
like in a lab.
No, are you talking about the scientific method adjusts for all the flaws in human perception as much as it possibly can, in all the biases, in seeing correlation when correlation doesn't exist, in seeing causation where causation doesn't exist, in seeing agency when there's no agency.
I mean, making repeatable predictions under laboratory
So all
conditions.
the problems that you have with human perception is exactly why we have the scientific method.
So how do you use the scientific method to solve major depression?
Oh my God! Like there's like
no, I'm not talking about studies. I'm talking about like use.
I mean,
right
you're
now,
asking a non-scientist to tell you exactly the scientific solution.
No,
to depression?
I'm asking you to imagine that you are in the grips of major depression, and I'm asking you to use the scientific method to heal yourself from it. Physician, heal thyself with the scientific method.
First of all, I'm not an expert, so I don't know the answer, but I can guarantee you that there is so much that the scientific world has to offer in that department.
Yeah,
more than anything.
And the scientific world, yes, but the individual human may not go to them and deal with them because
they should though. They should though. I think if you get the thing.
Them within their perceptions of the world, specifically because of how human brains have.
This is a win from my side. I don't understand why you're saying this. Like from when it comes to like dealing with depression, the scientific world has given us better solution than any other methodology.
What solution is this? What solution? What specific solution are you talking about?
Well, I mean, when it comes to medicine, when it comes to figuring out the source of the depression, when it comes to coming up with answers that have proven to have the best results, and this is like something that continues getting better and better and better. When it comes
you're talking about essentially medicine and psychotherapy.
No, there's many different fields on this. It's not just one.
Besides medicine and psychotherapy, what else? What else?
No, okay, but here's the thing: when it comes to actually finding the causes of depression, and it doesn't always lead to like
certainly. But here's the thing: when you deal with someone who's depressed,
one thing you shouldn't do is ask somebody who is not an expert in the field, like me, to give you the answer. Again, when it comes to relying on
I'm trying to make you see the problem that you're missing here. Let's say the scientific method has prescribed, and let's assume that things actually can be perfect. So let's assume that the scientific method has prescribed perfect.
What I'm saying. I think I clarified this many times. Yeah. There will be the scientific method will have its flaws, and it will never be perfect. Okay, it will not be perfect, and it will have many, many flaws. My argument is not that this is a perfect model. My argument is that
I'm not trying to argue that it's a perfect model. I'm trying to say even if it was a perfect model, it still wouldn't work for this situation. Like it would not work for what I'm bringing up.
Ermin, I think what Brenton is asking is not necessarily the scientific method, but the philosophy behind the scientific method. So if somebody is prescribing to that, they would tend to be more naturalistic, more materialistic. How would that?
Thank you. Yeah,
that's the question.
Like honestly, that's a philosophical problem called science.
Reality. If you want real solutions, you need to deal with the real world, which is a materialistic world.
Yeah, but well, actually, I would actually have some issues with that because, but that's beyond the scope of this.
Okay.
So here's the issue. So you're putting forth the like 19th century idea of materialism, that the world is material. And
get back to the example that you were giving. Like, what is the problem with, like, what is a better, if somebody is depressed, okay, and they're trying to figure out the solution to the problem, what is a better method than the scientific method?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, they're going to need faith to be able to even begin to take a step towards solving their problem. Because I don't know if you've ever dealt with major depression, but I have. And when you're in the throes of major depression, you don't see a way out of it. The medicine, you're certain, will not work. The therapy, you're certain, will be a waste of time. This is the problem with depression as a mental condition, and one of the problems with consciousness in general. When you talk to a depressed person and you try to talk them out of it, what they'll say, I'm not depressed. This is just the way things are. This is just the reality. Because to them, it is the reality.
Do you think that the scientific method, if there is a way to, like, doesn't give you, I mean, do you think that there isn't like thousands of literature written on exactly what a person in a depression will think and how you could give them the confidence and the positive way of thinking and the motivation and
and a lot of it points
framing
a lot of it points towards appealing to faith. Like
so your definition of faith is like something that is not like beyond the natural world. So what you call faith,
of course, it's not beyond the natural world. Faith absolutely is a part of the natural world.
Okay, but this is okay. So what you're calling faith might be considered like, I don't know, positive thinking or confidence or
not positive thinking, confidence,
motivation, or I don't know. I'm just saying like. Yeah. Or the motivation that somebody needs.
I would consider faith essentially.
Can I just finish this? Like, sure. If you, or the motivation.
Just don't put words in my mouth.
No. Okay, so I'm not saying you're saying this, right? But I'm saying that what you might be describing, again, these are examples that is not necessarily what you're saying, but I'm just giving you examples of things that within the scientific method could be described as the way as proven model of reframing their own view of their own depression that might actually put them in the right path to recover from their depression. Like, if that works,
sure,
I'm sure the only way to show if a better understanding of what your depression is and a reframing of your mind for you to get motivated to solve the problem, if that methodology works, the best way to see that methodology works is through the scientific method, where we
wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, where we would control.
And again, there's a number of studies that have shown this.
Exactly. Okay, great. So the scientific method, controlling for external variables, making sure that you have a large enough sample size, make sure it's double-blinded, making sure that you're not the correlation actually.
Armin, I don't have any issues with the scientific method as a method for making prognostication.
No, I know you don't. We're not arguing whether the scientific method is good or not. What we're arguing is that I think it's the best method. It's the best method, and even the things that you're saying that is a problem with depression that needs to be,
even if it were the best method, it still would be off topic from what we're talking about here, which is faith and the benefits of faith.
No, so what I'm saying is that it's the best method, and trying to promote any other way of getting at solutions and our understanding of reality is harmful because you're depriving people of relying on the best methodology. You're giving them,
ironically, you're giving me like a fundamentalist argument here.
Yeah,
we have to have one method to deal with all of our problems, and that one method must be the best method, and any other method is going to have problems and going to take away.
Let's put faith and science behind. Do you agree? Do you not agree that we should be promoting the best method over other methods? Like, forget science and faith and everything like that. I think you would agree with me, as somebody who wants to promote the best methodology to give us the best solutions. You would say, I favor the best methodology over inferior.
I favor the best methodology in the specific situation that we're dealing with. One methodology is not going to endure through every possible situation that one could have. You will never find one key that opens every door. You need a variety of keys to get through a variety of.
What the scientific method is, because the scientific method is the process of finding the best key. Like, it's not one key.
No, the scientific method is a method for making prognostications and repeatable experiments towards like the future.
Finding the best solution for every situation is best done, even if the solutions. So here's the thing: the scientific method is not saying, "Oh, here's a solution to everything." The scientific, like, you think different situations require different solutions, and the best way to find a different solution to the different solution is through the scientific method, because it tests everything and looks at the results, and based on the result, tells you what the solution to this specific situation is.
From an external perspective, under the current laws of the universe as we know them, yes, but I'm not simply talking about from an external perspective. I'm talking about humans internally. I'm essentially talking about, I don't believe souls literally exist, but I'm talking about the human soul. I'm talking about the human psyche. And there are serious psychological problems that result from an over-reliance on traditional scientific rational thinking. That's my issue.
Okay, so here, as somebody who believes in science, what I'm prescribing is not to be like, like sitting I'm talking about what promote to the society as large. I'm not saying like, okay, what show do I watch? Okay, let me look at the scientific method to figure out what show should I watch. Oh, like, oh my God, I feel like a little bit sad today. Okay, let me no, like, it's not like I don't understand what you mean by the over reliance. I'm just
so let me explain. So within this particular tradition, we have a couple of problems. One, that it came from the monotheistic Christian tradition, in the sense that we believed, in Christendom, that humans were created by God for a specific purpose, and that God, he cared about us and he loved us, but we had to fulfill that purpose or we would burn in hell, essentially. And that was the prevailing myth that surrounded Christendom since at least the fall of the Roman Empire, up until maybe it started to erode in the late 1800s, early 1900s, as a result of the religious wars and persecutions in Europe and the fall of the power of the church. So what happened was that we went from being a child of God by adoption and grace, because we weren't really one of the family. We had to accept Jesus's salvation to be, but we had a distinct purpose within the world. We were essentially like robots built by God to love God, and we needed to do our purpose. Then this crumbles, and we get rid of God. Well, then what are we? We are essentially ghosts driving a meat suit on so much bacteria on a rock in an indifferent universe that we came into as a stranger within the world. This isn't how the world really is at all. But it is the idea of the fully automatic, mechanical, material universe, where they say everything is material and consciousness is just a very sophisticated form.
So, there are beautiful ways to frame each side and very disgusting ways to frame both sides of this. Like, if the same thing that you described right now, if you read Carl Sagan or The Magic of Reality by Richard Dawkins, you could have a much more beautiful framing of what you just described.
Or I can read Alan Watts and get it even better. But I know that there are beautiful ways to describe it.
Child of God scenario, you could describe as slaves of God and also damned to be burning. So I don't again, this is why these framings of things is not a really reliable way of figuring out which one is real and which one isn't. We have to use the scientific method is a better way than these just
well, I don't
emotional
know
intuition.
that the scientific method can tell us, for instance, what is the purpose of life. Like
What?
The scientific method can't tell us what's the purpose of life.
Yeah, because there is no purpose of life. We individually decide. Decide what our purpose is going to be. You know that.
Well, that's an existentialist argument, and I don't 100% disagree with it, but I actually do have a disagreement. I think the purpose of life is what it exists for itself. The purpose of life is simply to live and to exist. I would liken it to.
That's your answer, and that's not my answer. But I'm just saying, like the scientific method doesn't have answers to questions that don't have answers. Obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it shouldn't.
Yeah, the science exactly. So again, you can't just rely on the scientific method and put down other methods as being inferior.
But the scientific, like when it comes to purpose, even though it doesn't have the answer to the purpose of life, because that answer does not exist. But for you personally,
I think there's a definite answer to the purpose of life.
Okay, but to you personally, to what your purpose of life is, and for you to understand what. Hold on, let me just.
I think it would be.
Can I just continue? For you to understand what your purpose in life is, for you to understand what reality, like to know what your purpose is in life, is you would be well more equipped to answering that question if you actually understand your reality, if you understand the nature of the world around you, if you understand the best tools to be more in control of your own feelings and your awareness of your own thoughts, and again, all of this you would be in a much more, whatever that answer is, again, that answer is different for every person, but whatever that answer is, you are way more likely to arrive at it if you have a better roadmap, if you have a better understanding of what reality is like, and you will be able to navigate your traveling through this reality. You will be able to navigate yourself and arrive at a better conclusion and arrive at your destination, and your destination is going to be different from other people's destination, but your map shouldn't be. Your map should be based on reality.
I don't think my destination is different from other people's destination. I think everyone has the same purpose to life. Like I really do. Like, it's my opinion, but in my opinion, I think there is a single unified purpose to life.
Let's say I get cancer. I have a tumor. I already discovered I have a tumor. Okay. And I want to deal with the situation. How does faith help me with this situation?
How does faith help you? Because you can tell yourself, I'm going to get through this.
Okay. Is that your definition of faith? Just having confidence in something?
It's one aspect of faith. It's the ability, and then the other aspects of faith is, even if you don't get through this, it's still going to be okay. You know?
That's also just confidence and positive thinking and stuff like that.
I mean,
motivation. That's not
positive thinking has a really nasty connotation because
I'm saying that's a good thing. Like I know there's scientific.
Yeah, I'm saying it's kind of a bad thing.
I wasn't saying. No, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying it as a good thing. But I'm just saying, there needs to be a difference between the definition of faith and confidence and positive thinking, because if that's all it is,
let's take this cancer argument through to the end here. So this is actually, I think this can actually help us understand what I'm trying to get at with regard to faith. So you get cancer, and you're very worried that you're going to die. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say, for instance, that the doctor comes to you and says, basically, you've got 2 months to live. There's absolutely nothing we can do. Okay. Now, a scientific worldview would likely trust the doctor and say, okay, I am going to die, and that's it. I'm done. Is that correct?
Well, the scientific method also says that if you are put in a positive mood, your immune system would be stronger, and you would probably you would be able more.
How do you get yourself in a positive mood when you know that there's no hope?
Well, there's a lot of studies on that, on how to bring people in terms with accepting the new reality and how to adjust with that. What are the best things to say to a patient like that? What are the best questions? Like, there's a lot of trials and analysis on what works.
Essentially.
are many, like as other medicine or else what do people tell them. There's a lot of debates. There's a lot of disagreements. There's a lot of tests. There are a lot of studies.
Yeah. And you notice you're talking about what everyone around the person does, but you're not really talking about what the person does internally.
No, it's basically it's exactly about what to tell, how to get the patient to a situation where they reframe the way of looking.
You are not the one who is actually suffering from the cancer, as if this is something to be diagnosed and dealt with as a doctor and not as the person themselves.
How we can help our fellow human beings. Yeah,
correct. It's very easy to look at someone else and in a difficult situation and diagnose their problem and how to fix them, and you can be right or wrong with that. But that's not really what I'm talking about, because again,
what the patient should rely on as a non-scientist.
I'm sorry?
Taking what the patient should do, not what the people who are trying to help the patient should do as a non-scientist. Right. Again, I think the patient should also go look at the latest studies on how to help themselves.
Do you think that's possibly a good use of the last time on Earth, is reading a bunch of
because they have very little time.
That they probably don't even understand because they're not an academic.
They need to ask experts to tell them what is the best, what the studies shows, to tell them what your problem is. They're like, hey, listen, I have 2 weeks to live. I want to be happy in this last 2 weeks, right? Based on your expert analysis, what is the most efficient way of me getting myself there? And ask multiple experts. Get the second, third, and fourth opinion. Okay?
I am freaking stunned by this.
Here's the thing. Given that you have your own answers as well, right?
I'm sorry, Armin. Yes, I do have my own answers as well, but
no, not you, the patient, right? So here's for example, let's say here's what I would do. Okay, let's say I have 2 weeks to live. Okay, I will go online and we will look at other people's experiences and what they did in the
when you could be spending important time with your family. When you could be putting your affairs in order and getting the most out of life, you're going to be online searching for a way to extend your life.
You know how you said you put words in your mouth?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do you think I'm not going to do that? Do you think I'm not going to be? Do you think I'm going to spend my last 2 weeks just doing research and I'm not going to be sitting next to my wife and telling her how much I love her? Do you think I'm not going to call my dad? I can't go visit him because I would get executed if I go back to Iran. Do you think I'm not going to spend time spending as much as I can with my brother just because I'm spending some time researching and seeing how other people were dealing with their depressions, just because I spent some time seeing how people got the best results in the shortest amount of time? Do you think I'm not going to try to figure out what is the most, how I could go and maybe spend some time in nature and meditate? Do you think I'm not going to do all of these things just because I'm spending some time just to see how other people also dealt with this and how other people got the best results? Do you think that contradicts each other?
I would think that there is a bit of a conflict here, and I also think we can't really know what we do until we are really faced with that situation.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that there's lessons to be learned from other people that have dealt with the situation, and doing one of these things does not contradict me spending quality time with the people who I love.
I think seeking out a way in those last 2 weeks, is trying to seek out a way suddenly to have those best possible last 2 weeks in that moment. I think that is not going to be high on your list of priorities. You may spend some time doing it.
I think there might be something that just clicks that, it's such a missed opportunity. Maybe maybe because I didn't see something that I would have seen if maybe I didn't do the research, maybe I didn't look into this, but there was just some information there that would have made this last 2 weeks so much easier for me to endure if I just knew that information. If somebody just told us hey, this has been a tried and proven method,
you might feel like that.
Things like this. And if I see that and I try it, and it makes my last 2 weeks so much easier, I think it's worth just doing a little bit of research.
I think doing a little bit of research might be a natural thing for somebody to do. Right. I don't think you're going to find the secret in like the last 2 weeks of your life in research. I don't think that's going to happen.
But I think it's better than listening to this person like, hey, go, like I know somebody who's like, hey, go to India. There's this guy that will cure your tumor and something like that, and like just believe me and have faith. Like imagine spending my last 2 weeks doing that, right? So I'm just saying that, yeah, okay. If you don't want to do, if you think you already have the answer, if you think like in the last 2 weeks you know that this is what you want to do, then do you. But I'm saying if you don't know, if you have no fucking idea, clue, like, oh my God, I have 2 weeks to live and I don't know what to do. And if you want at that point, if you're looking for answers, there are better ways to come up with an answers, and there are horrible ways to come at an answer. And I know this, because my mom died of cancer, right?
Sorry to hear that. My condolences.
Yeah, and between the time that I realized that she had cancer and then she died, it was 1 month. Like what at some point I had a mom and everything was okay, and I had a happy family. And then I told that she had cancer, and within 1 month, then I had no mother, and it was like it was almost impossible to come to terms with this new reality, right? Mm-hmm. But during this 1 month, we were getting a lot of suggestion. And a lot of it was based on faith. And guess what? They were all horrible. They will all make my last month with my mother way, way more stressful to her, to me, to my family. And it would have made that last month a miserable. I'm so glad.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure that that's representative of what I'm talking about.
Glad. Yeah, maybe not you. Maybe other people's version of faith, right? Yeah. I'm so glad that what we decided to do as a family was to listen to the experts, and the experts told us that, listen, her chances are very low. My dad wanted to do chemotherapy. They told us that you are just going to make her more miserable for longer. She is very likely, there's a chance that she will survive, but she's very likely going to die. Do you want to have a shorter quality time with her or a longer time with her suffering through chemotherapy? And that was the honest opinion of the experts that we were dealing with.
Yeah, my dad, good opinion. My dad might have said the same thing.
And we decided to listen to the experts, and we decided instead of trying to cure her cancer, we decided to try to focus on all the solutions that will make her time less painful. Everything that we did in the last month was not about curing her cancer, was about trying to have quality time with her in the last month that we had with her. And
that's a very good way to approach things.
Yeah, and I'm glad we listened to the experts in that situation.
Yeah, I'm glad you did too, because again, these are medical professionals and they deal with this situation quite frequently. But what you described is very different from at least how it seemed to me in the first characterization of your argument. So essentially what I'm talking
that's my failure at communicating. Sorry.
No, it's all right. It could also be my own bias jumping in there and deciding to mess with it. So, and my condolences with your mother. That is a terrible thing that you had to go through, and I'm very sorry about it. My point on this whole thing is that, and this is kind of getting a little bit into my own religious beliefs, and mine are not based simply on faith. In fact, I think they have a lot to do with like modern quantum physics and like a lot of what we understand. It's more of a different way of reframing the world. It's a way of looking at things. And one of the things that I've found, which is really key, because death has been a very serious presence in my life. I'm a goth. It happens. I was touched by death when a friend of mine passed away unexpectedly in his sleep at 25 years of age out of nowhere, 5 days before I turned 25. And that has been the major catalyzing event of my life since then. It drove me to hike the Appalachian Trail. It drove a lot of my creative work. It got me to move to New York City, and I have been searching for answers to the riddle of death ever since. And over the past few years, with a lot of meditation, a lot of thought, a lot of Buddhist practice, I didn't find the answers in like Western rationalism. I didn't find them in the writings of Christopher Hitchens, even though he talked somewhat similarly about this. And, you know, I read his final writings before he died.
That was not the intention of those writings, though, but go on.
No, I know. Well, he did. He talked quite a bit about death towards the end. You know, where I found them was in the philosophy of Alan Watts and Soka Gakkai, and realizing essentially that the ego, the individual, isn't real, and that while we may perceive ourselves as being in this particular body and being this particular I, that's simply not all that we are. What we actually are is the sum total, the totality of life and experience. We are the
another topic, though, isn't it?
Say what?
That's another topic. I'm glad to have that.
It ties into this because it deals with the fundamental, and there's a video on my channel which you might want to check out after this, which is called Shunyata, the Void, where I specifically talk about how this addresses like the major problem in Western philosophy ever since the fall of the church. Because really what we've got is, ever since the fall of the church, and ever since we all agreed that mankind is not actually a child of God, and heaven's probably not waiting for us, and hell's probably not waiting for us, what has happened is, from Nietzsche on, you know, have been attempts to keep nihilism at bay, to keep the I'm this little me in this giant, cold, unfeeling universe. And lots of philosophers, including the existentialists, and you put forth an existentialist philosophy, and I quoted an existentialist thinker at the beginning, have had various ways to deal with this.
But most people didn't have to deal with that. Most philosophers ended up having to deal with that, but most common people didn't have to deal with that without religion.
I mean, I would highly disagree with that. And in fact, I think that that is kind of the driving force beyond a lot of our social ills, including, you know, World War II and especially the Holocaust. If you read
we could discuss that on another topic, but I think less
I think this gets to the core of this, though, because
fellas, we've been at it for nearly an hour.
The happiest countries in the world are the ones without religion. So that's basically...
Yeah, but you can have faith without religion.
All right, hey guys, we've been at it for like nearly an hour. I was, you know, I try to keep it real open so y'all can talk about it, because it seems like neither one of y'all was defending or arguing against faith in like something supernatural. So that's why I let it be like open, so you could define.
Oh, so we both agree with that, right? Brent believe the supernatural could go fuck itself. Can we?
Yeah. If the supernatural existed, it would just be like some kind of technology or natural law that we don't have. If people actually go to heaven, there's a natural mechanism to send their consciousness to heaven. Like that's
Here we got some questions that's coming in. So let's start reading off these questions.
Can I tell people to check us both out, me and Brent?
Absolutely. The link is in the description below. Definitely check these guys out. Also, keep these super chats coming. You know, house maintenance. You know, James got to get that sweater. He told me he wanted to buy a nice sweater, so got to.
Who's just getting good?
Yeah, we're gonna go through it. Y'all still gonna have the opportunity to go through some more ideas, and then we'll let y'all give y'all closing statements and stuff like that. So I do have one question right here. Thanks for the $20, Rodney. He said, in Iraq, atheists/secularists are growing ever larger every day. Say that one more time.
Your audio is a little bit low.
I'm sorry. Hold up. All right. Can you hear me any better now?
It's fine. Yeah.
It's fine. All right. I'm sorry, man. Well, it said, once again, thanks for the $20, Rodney. He asked, or he states, in Iraq, atheists/secularists are growing ever larger every day, and young Iraqis are abandoning religion altogether. This trend, impossible in Saddam's Iraq, vindicates Christopher Hitchens' stand that intervention in Iraq was justified. Does anybody have want to comment on that?
No, I think I don't agree with. I don't agree with the fact that it's impossible, because right in neighboring country Iran, we just came out studies that shows that half of Iranians have left religion within their lifetime. Okay, half. I mean, I was shocked by that number, okay? Iran, but according to the latest number, is a Muslim minority country. And this is not within generations, within their lifetime, half of Iranians have left Islam. So to argue that this would have been impossible, I mean, Saddam wasn't even a theocrat. We're talking about people that are living under a theocracy, Islamic theocracy. They're leaving Islam by numbers that I didn't think it would be possible in my lifetime. So your premise, I think, is wrong.
Yeah, I'm horrified by that. How many millions of people have died? How many lives have been shattered and destroyed? How many children have been crippled? And you're saying that this is all good because a couple people left the church in Iraq? Like, seriously, that is one of the most disgusting things that I've ever heard. That the Iraq War and the War on Terror is probably the single greatest, most inhumane disaster of the 21st century. It led directly to the rise of ISIS and the freaking war in Syria, where freaking Assad is dropping barrel bombs on his own people.
Yemen.
You imperialist piece of crap. I don't get mad at people usually, but I'm darn mad at you. Okay, continue. Okay,
no, but here I do want to be clear with people, because I think a lot of people confuse Iraq and Iran. So Iraq, like the numbers in Iran are for people leaving religion is higher than Iraq. Okay, Iran, and this is a neighboring country. Okay, and both of Iraq and Iran are Shia majority countries. Okay, but I do agree with Brent. I think like that was the consequence. The number of people that have paid for this war and continue to this day to pay for that war does really prove Hitchens wrong on that one. I mean, I can still respect someone's right beliefs, right views, and admit that they were wrong about something. You know, that's not a contradiction.
I think Hitchens was the best of the new atheists, honestly. I named my cat after him, but like, yeah, he as a human being, he left the world worse than he found it.
I don't know about that. Maybe.
Well, fair enough. I can't blame all of the Iraq war on.
I don't think without Hitchens, the Iraq war would not happen. I don't think you could blame Hitchens for that.
Okay, fair enough. You're right. My bad. I got a little. I'm surprised. I don't normally get emotional. I don't even get mad at Nazis usually.
All right, Sparta 344 Czar. Thanks for the $35. Open question. He says Brenton's bug example. Those bugs have faith in their senses. They're not making a rational decision. You lose, boy. Well, I'm not going to say that. He said, yeah.
That's all right. I insulted the last guy, but yeah, no, faith in your sense. That's empiricism. That's the basis of the scientific method. So like, insects don't have the capability of faith one way or another. Like they can't even, I remember when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, Maine to Georgia, I would run into spider webs. And I said to one of the other hikers, I was like, hey, I wish they would learn to not build their webs on the trail. And the other hiker's like, I'm glad they can't learn anything. I think it's ridiculous to talk about faith in terms of an insect mind.
Just to clarify, the scientific method relies on the information that it gets from its sensory methods, but it doesn't trust them, right? It has to go through a cleansing process. Like it doesn't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, correct. It's just, you couldn't have the scientific method without empiricism.
You couldn't have anything without relying on you have to have the data feed. You have to get data coming in from some,
but that's different than philosophical empiricism in the sense that like rationalism predated empiricism. And we still had data coming in. It's
not about how the data comes into your conscious mind. It's about how you treat it after it comes into your conscious mind.
Yes, correct.
Okay, Gabriel. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Gabrielle. Thanks for the $5. Says bottom line is, do you believe the human mind is the product of matter coming together, or there is a supernatural agent behind it? If so, prove it.
I think we both agree that there's no
supernatural agent. Yeah, I mean there could be, but there's no evidence for such a thing. I don't. It's a good idea there.
Could. I mean, I actually with this one, I don't even know if it could be, because if it is any supernatural element, once we understand it, then it's part of nature.
Yeah. What I wanted to bring up here is so like consciousness and the so-called hard problem of consciousness, and how does consciousness arise from unconsciousness? There's two ways of looking at this. There's the idea that consciousness is just a sophisticated form of matter, which I think is fine, but also that means that matter is just a basic form of consciousness. And it would mean that essentially, and I actually agree this is correct, like rocks are somewhat conscious in the sense that I can take a rock and bang on it and there's a response from it. So
we have a different definition of consciousness then, because I don't think a banging back that you get from a rock, that's
a response essentially.
What?
It's a response.
You're redefining responses as consciousness, and therefore, like, then
basic consciousness, I would say. Like I would say,
that's not what people mean when they say rocks are conscious, though.
No, I don't think there's a spirit, a literal spirit living in the rock, and the rock
is any intelligence or understanding or perception.
No.
Yeah. So, but why are you redefining words?
I'm not redefining words. I'm just saying that, like, for instance, the philosophical zombie, that's a problem with regard to consciousness that a lot of philosophers deal with.
But I'm just saying that, given that you know what most people mean when they saying conscious, then don't say rocks have consciousness.
Well, no, I like to do that because that engages people. Like when you it confuses them, and then they want to find out what the hell you're talking about, and then they listen.
Promoting ideas that are not okay. So, for example, you can say God, there is no evidence for the existence of a God. All right, and you're like, well, to me, God is just love. I'm like, fine, your God is real, but you know what you could do? You could just call love love. Or somebody said, like, hey, to me, God is nature. Like, we already have a word for that. It's called nature. God damn it.
So
like,
yeah. That's the argument. You're essentially objecting to Spinoza's God. And it's funny because I would actually say yes to Spinoza's God, but I wouldn't define that God in sort of the Western kingly sense. I'd define it closer to like Brahman, like the deep down stuff that there is in the universe, ultimate reality. And that's what would be why I might say that we are all God pretending he's not. Or it's not.
I think both Einstein and Hawkins realized what it's at stake when it comes to playing poetry with the word God. A lot of people will attribute your usage of the word God as to prove that to legitimize theism, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why both Hawkins and Einstein regret using poetic language to describe things.
Sure, but I'm literally a poet. Like they're scientists,
right?
So maybe it's a little okay for a poet to use poetic language.
Okay, but if you notice that maybe your poetic license is actually causing confusion, maybe be very clear. Maybe you're doing that actually. You're
check out my channel. I'm pretty clear in what I'm talking about.
Okay,
all right, we got another a statement from Sparta 344 Czar. He says devil's lettuce, moderate alcohol, Fiji beaches, and reading Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. Best 2 weeks ever. Problem solved.
Awesome.
I'm gonna write that down actually for
he's referring, by the way, to my comic book.
Oh.
In the end there.
Awesome,
Yeah. The Fiji, that really sounds really good. So, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so hey, Praise, I know he's our producer over there. Do we have any more questions coming in, or is that all our questions there?
I just want to say Snow White. I don't know what it's about, but Snow White Zombie is an epic title. Like that's.
I'll send you a copy, or you're in Canada, right?
Just send me a PDF.
I'll send you a PDF. You can read the first and second issue.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so if y'all got closing statements, we gave Brenton the first word, so we'll give him the last word, or should we give Airman the last word?
My closing statement is that it's always fun talking to Brenton. That's all it is. Like, I always enjoy talking to Brenton. I don't have much else to say. I think I already said everything. It's some of the most fun conversations I have.
Absolutely. Well, I really enjoy it too, and this was really interesting. I think we talked around like a lot of really big ideas throughout all of this, but kind of what I really wanted to get at is that I'll sort of close with this. My religious practice in Buddhism involves chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo to the Gohonzon, which is a scroll on my wall, and there's a lot of questions, and a lot of the time, like, because I was an atheist for like 4 years in New York, and it wasn't until my faith returned that I began to practice my Buddhism. But what I can tell you is that there's this, we call it devilish functions. There's this little voice in your head that wants to keep you in the place that you're at because we get freaked out by change. And so when you first go and decide you want to start religious practice, there's the idea, in much the same way that you go and you want to start psychotherapy, there's the idea that, oh, this doesn't actually do anything. And what I can tell you is I can't 100% explain why it works, but the practice of daimoku and gongyo twice a day has changed my life in a huge way. I've seen measurable differences in my mood that have exceeded what I was able to do on medicine and exercise. Now, I still did medicine and exercise because I don't think that faith alone is something that we should try to run our life on. I think that it is one of many strategies in our quiver for dealing with difficulties within the world. But I think that it is something that we have, as a technological, scientific culture, we have gone a little too far, and we have inframed the world. We have inframed each other. And as such, we have sucked a lot of the meaning out of life and turned life into a task. And I'm not going to say that that's necessarily because of science, but I'm going to say that it's because of a form of thinking that our particular culture associates with science. And so what I think overall, what we need together is we need to realize that we are, in fact, all connected, and that we are connected to our environment, to our communities, and to the world and the universe as a whole. And I don't care if you want to call that religion or if you just want to call that reality. In fact, it makes no difference from where I'm sitting. But it is something that we need to recognize before we destroy ourselves, either through nuclear war or, more likely what it seems, global warming. So thank you.
Or AI.
Or AI. I think AI would be nice.
No, benevolent AI would be nice.
Yeah. We did get one more question in. So let me read that right quick. Comes by way of, I'm not even going to try to say this name. I'll butcher it. I know it. XALYSIX. That's their name. Thanks for the $5. They say people don't necessarily turn to science to solve our social problems. Rather, it has been religion or faith in ideologies. So if either one of y'all want to answer that, and we'll give Armin the last word.
I just want to say that for every story of somebody having positive experience from going off the scientific method to something else, there are hundreds and thousands of people that had their lives and their results would have been ruined, and that they get subpar results because of it, right? And again, to judge whether relying on other methods works or doesn't work, we can't just rely on anecdotal examples. Well, I tried it and it worked for me, right? And the way to realize if some methodology works or not is to look at large numbers, high sample sizes that is collected in a a scientific method, and then analyze it in a very methodological and careful way, right? Again, which is far better than looking at someone's story telling me like, well, I did this and I had a good experience, right? That's not a very reliable way of realizing if something works or not, right? And when it comes to relying on the scientific method, when it comes to people, you're saying, I have to say, like, there are more people that are not dealing with their children dying under the age of 5. There are more people more women that are not dying through childbirth. People, when they're not going through torture every time they have to have their teeth pulled out, right? People have access to clean water. People have access to more food because of these methods. People have access to their loved ones and much more than they did before because of these methods. People have more of a say in their lives, in their future, in their destiny, in everything, in their surroundings, in their environment because of these methods, right? People are living happier, more meaningful lives because of these methods, right? So, and yes, there are flaws, there are mistakes, there are setbacks, there are overcorrections, there are many things that you could point to examples of things that went wrong, but we are a happier, less violent, less miserable, less sick, less hungry, less poor world because of the scientific method. And we have to recognize that, and we have to be grateful for it, and we have to be very, very careful if somebody wants to promote an alternative method in replacement of it.
Yeah. I will just respond to that in the sense that I disagree. I don't think we're actually happier. And in fact, if you look at like the data on it, people who live in hunter-gatherer cultures tend to report higher. Yeah, Steven Pinker is a liberal.
Read this book and check. Don't trust this book. Follow the sources after you read the book.
Okay. Your weirdo cheerleader for the rich and powerful is
and also get my book. And here's something
you should
that
get his book.
Yeah, and here's an anti-rich thing. You don't have to make me rich if you can't afford this book. If you can afford it, just buy it. But if you can't afford it, or if you live in a country that there's no Amazon, or if you don't have a credit card, contact us on Atheist Republic, and I'll send you a free PDF copy of this book as well.
That's super cool. You should definitely get Armin's book, and you should get Snow White Zombie if you can. Yeah, my point here, I will point out that Cambodia. In Cambodia, the population prior to Westerners coming in and bringing their technology was a population of peaceful Theravada Buddhists,
and they were the greatest human rights violation of all time. By
yes, and let me finish.
More people need to know about it. Yeah, I agree with you.
And here's the thing: when the Westerners came in, we introduced new crop yield methods, new scientific methods to boost their crop yield. And we were talking about this. So prior, the Buddhists worked 6 months out of the year and took 6 months out of the year off. And initially, when the Westerners put in their new technology, it doubled their harvest when they found that the Buddhists worked 3 months out of the year and took 9 months out of the year off. And they said, well, this can't be. And they instituted capitalism and currency and all of the wonderful things that we have in the West that Steven Pinker praises. And before Pol Pot, this led to mobs tearing infants apart in the street. The technology provides a lot of great things for us, and I am certainly not a primitivist, and I am not anti-technology or anti-science, but we cannot see it as a totalitarian solution because it strips humanity from the world. It strips, and again, it breaks us down into units that produce value for shareholders, and that's nothing anybody wants to be.
That's not at all within the definition of the scientific method.
It doesn't have to be in the definition. It's within the effect. And remember, the Buddha talked about that. Look at what it actually does.
People get happier looking at themselves in different ways. The best way to figure out how people can see themselves in nature and in society, what produces what framing of the mind will make them the most happy. The way to figure that out, to answer that question, is the scientific method. And even the examples of where the scientific method was made, like used, and the results weren't good. If you actually look at the problems, if you see that if there was a closer, if it actually used the scientific method in those situations to figure out where was the flaw and where was the problem, the only way to fix that is to use the scientific method even more, not less, more. That's how you solve the mistakes of the people when they've used the scientific method. In fact,
if you say so.
We got one more question.
One more question. What do we got?
Bad science is better science.
So this is for Brenton. It's from Gabrielle. She gave us another couple of bucks. She says, I think Brenton mistook psychology for faith. It's okay.
I would say I more or less mistook philosophy for faith, but again, I'm a Buddhist, and it's been said that Buddhism is more philosophy than religion. I don't really care what you call it. There's a strict delineation in Western tradition between like the sacred and the profane, and we look like, and so like for instance, once the idea of God crumbled, we had the idea that everything is profane and nothing is sacred. Whereas in my view, the sacred and the profane are exactly the same. Samsara is nirvana. It's just in how you look at it.
All right, so here, let's get ready to wrap it up. Let's give it up to our two debaters. I mean, they touched on some real deep topics, including like real serious issues, including like death and depression and stuff like that. These are real serious issues, so we definitely appreciate what you guys brought to the table. I do want to share this. Like me personally, whenever I ever went to anything troubling, I always would look back to the American psychologist and a great humanist, Albert Ellis. He was the father of rational emotive behavioral therapy, which contributed heavily to cognitive behavioral therapy as it exists now. So,
which has helped my wife huge. Like it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. But people go through things. They find various ways to try to handle it. and we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, and this conversation definitely helps along that way. So we definitely appreciate you guys.
We appreciate you as the moderator.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Try to do my best. All right, so let's wrap it up. Once again, linked for these debaters is in the description below. Definitely check these guys out. Definitely check out what you said, Snow White Apocalypse.
Snow White Zombie Apocalypse.
Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. And what was the name of your book?
Why There Is No God.
Why There Is No God. Definitely check these guys out. All right.
We'll have to continue these conversations, Armin, because this was fascinating and you did not disappoint.
Oh, really? Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. Appreciate it, guys. All right, so let's wrap this thing on up. Y'all have a good night, all right?
All right.